We were four guys that I met Paul and said, "Do you want to join the band?" You know? And then George joined, and then Ringo joined. We were just a band who made it very, very big.
Welcome to Stranger Waves, a factual-based recounting of the unexplained and obscure mysteries of the world. On this wave, we have 3 stories of people traveling to alternative Earths, each shaking the very foundation of reality. Let us start in the year 1851, Germany. A confused man was seen wandering the streets of the village, completely lost of his whereabouts. When approached, the man introduced himself as Jofar Vorn. He stated he was from a country called Laxaria, found on the continent of Sacria, across the ocean. The man explained that he had sailed across the ocean to locate his long-lost brother, but his ship got wrecked on the shore. The man had then wandered into the village and was clearly lost. Further questioning determined that Jofar Vorn's countrymen were known for their considerable knowledge of world geography. But when shown a map of the Earth, this stranger was confused and unable to discern where he was or where his country was located. He explained there were 5 great continents called Sacria, Aflar, Aeslar, Auslar, and Uplar. Jofar Vorn lived the remainder of his days in Berlin, but nothing further has been released of his story. Was he from a parallel world? Is there another world out there where he vanished off the face of the earth, just like his brother had? Or is his story just a creative urban tale? Before you decide, listen to this next story about another man lost on another world. In 1954, this man's plane landed in Tokyo, Japan, for a planned business trip. The man walked up to customs as he had always done in prior trips, and handed the customs agent his passport. The customs agent looked from the passport to the man, and asked the man to be escorted into an interrogation room. It was there when things began to get really strange. The agents put down the man's passport and asked the man where he was from. The man simply answered Torrid. The man's passport looked authentic and stamped with several other countries around the world, except for the fact that the originating country, Torrid, doesn't exist. The man, uncertain if this was an elaborate prank, explained in fluent Japanese that he was a business traveler from Torrid and that his country existed for thousands of years between the borders of France and Spain. His interrogators pulled out a map and asked the man to point out his country. The man pointed to the tiny country of Andoria, but was confused why his country was called that. The man was able to produce a driver's license and a checkbook from an unknown bank. The customs agents locked the man into a nearby hotel room, 15 stories up, with an officer standing outside his door. The next morning, with intentions of questioning the businessman further, they opened the hotel room door to find that the man had vanished without a trace. Where had he gone is anyone's guess. Perhaps the man from Torrid simply returned home. We can only hope that this is the case instead of being lost on unfamiliar parallel worlds. In both of these stories, there is no evidence except for the stories themselves. As strange as they may be, without proof, they are no more than a fascinating story that are only as real as you want them to be. But what if there was evidence of another world? Let us move forward to the year 2009, where a person from our world stumbled onto another universe and brought back something that may make you rethink the possibility of alternative realities. On September 9th, 2009, a man named James Richards experienced something that people continue to question to this day, and have all but called a hoax. I'll recount the story, and you can decide. James and his dog had just finished visiting a friend in Turlock, California, and started the drive back home to Livermore. He had decided to take the scenic route that day through Del Puerto Canyon. Around mid-afternoon, his dog started getting anxious, as if she had to relieve herself. He pulled over the next parking area along the side of the road and let his dog out. While James was stretching his legs, his dog began barking and ran away, chasing after something. James ran after his dog, but tripped on a rabbit hole, hit his head on the ground, knocking himself out. When he came to, he and his dog found themselves in a strange room with electronics and furniture. Another man entered the room, introducing himself as Jonas. James asked where he was, and Jonas replied he was just 20 feet where he found him unconscious with his dog. Jonas then explained the next thing he was going to tell him will sound shocking and unbelievable. Jonas had said he had taken him and his dog to a parallel Earth. Jonas explained that on his world, traveling to parallel worlds was common but expensive. James was full of questions about Jonas's world history. Jonas explained that in the 1950s the government had a choice to invest in either the space program with NASA or a parallel dimension program called ARP-D. It had chosen to invest in parallel dimensions. Jonas explained that a lot of the worlds were dangerous for various reasons, such as some were covered in water or other geographical differences, or worlds with no humans at all. Jonas's role was to find safe transport sites for people from his world. The conversation eventually moved to pop culture and music. James was surprised to learn that the Beatles still existed and toured in Jonas's world. Jonas showed him the albums he had copied on cassette and played some of the songs for him. James was astonished at the songs, and he asked if he could take a copy of one of the albums. Jonas got very serious and told him that nothing from this world can be taken back to his world for his own safety. James dropped the subject and they spoke about other things for another hour. At one point the doorbell rang and Jonas left the room. James then took the opportunity to steal one of the Beatles albums, and Jonas never realized it had been taken when he returned. After some time of comparing world histories, James told Jonas he should go home. Jonas complied, thanked him for his time, and opened up a portal back to James's world. Back at home, James looked closer at the cassette he had taken. In his hands was a copy of a Beatles album produced on another world called Everyday Chemistry. It featured 11 songs that sounded remarkably like the Beatles. Don't believe me? All of the background music on this episode are from that album. You can find the entire album online at various places to listen for yourself. Skeptics have determined that all of the songs are mashups of older Beatles songs already released in our world. In 2014, James Richards was interviewed and asked to comment on the discovery. His answer? I had the feeling that some of the songs had a familiar sound to them as well. The only conclusion I can come up with is even though in the alternative universe the Beatles hadn't broken up, that didn't mean their future music ideas disappeared. So did the Beatles create an entire album of mashups on an alternate universe to keep themselves relevant after 40 years in the music business? It's not too far-fetched. Or did James Richards create 11 mashups of Beatles songs and weave a story around them as a means to promote his album and skills? If so, he hasn't capitalized on it in any known way. For the time being, these three stories remain afloat in the waves of a strange somewhere between multiple dimensions. On the next Stranger Waves, we will take travel to the far north for a Halloween tale of Arctic zombies. Until next time, remain in this dimension to continue to ride the Stranger Waves.
'Cause I'm the